Hi everyone. Welcome back to If I Hire Wings, episode 28, where our main character Aoi is currently playing Flight Simulator. Well, actually, he's being trained on how to fly the glider by Amane, and Amane showed Aoi the different control surfaces that are used to operate the glider. And near the end of episode 27, Amane showed Aoi what happens when an aircraft is in stall. And the stall in real life has brought down many airliners, notably Air France Flight 447 in 2009. So, I feel that the flight simulator could be more realistic if Amane used rudder pedals instead of a controller with L and R buttons, because it would give Aoi some feeling of what it'll be like when he does get into the glider. And obviously, the flight simulator is a good tool to start pilots off, but most of the time, the simulator's more used to show pilots what happens when the aircraft ends up in an adverse condition. So, engine goes out, they encounter some rough turbulence or storm, more like the unexpected, uncommon circumstances. Well, anyways, let's see how his flight lessons go in this episode. So, I always like. So Amane selects the mode, and once again, we start flying.
で、次はラダーペダル。
Okay, so now Amane's going to show Aoi the rudder pedals. So in the simulator, this is controlled with that L and R buttons. So once again, he should have real pedals instead of these controller buttons.
これはラダーを操作するわけだが、ラダーとは日本語で方向だという垂直尾翼についている。右を踏めば機種が右を向き、左を踏めば機種が左を向く。ヨーイングの動きを制御するんだ。
横を向くの？でも曲がるときは主翼についてるエレロンを使うんでしょ？
Well, it's supposed to turn sideways, but I think it can end up rolling the airplane.
エルロンだけで旋回した場合、グライダーは正面を向いたままバンクした内側に滑っていくように移動することになる。
Well, that's true to an extent. Though, for some reason, I was told that the airplane would always turn if it's banked.
どういうこと？前を向いたまま斜めに進むってことじゃない？
Amane nods.
そこで同時にラダーを操作してやり、旋回したい方向へ頭を向けてやるんだ。
Or maybe the rudder is being used during turns. It's just that we don't really see it because it's on the very back of the airplane. Oh, so like the handlebars on a bicycle? So while leaning the bike, you can turn the handlebars in that direction. If you don't, you won't be able to turn well. So using bicycles as an example, lean the bike left or right like the ailerons, and the handlebars are like the rudder. Yeah, that's true.
なるほど。旋回したいときはエレロンとラダー両方が必要と。
そうだ。けど、それだけじゃまだ不十分だ。旋回中、機体を傾けると揚力が減るので、機体が大きく降下してしまう。
Well, that's true.
なるべく高度を保ったまま旋回するには、操縦桿を横に倒しながら少しだけ後ろに引いてやる必要があるんだ。
Okay. So when you turn, you must use all the axes at the same time. Now, in a regular passenger jet, what they do is they actually increase the engine power, but that's not available in a glider. So using what and when looks like it's quite intuitive.
以上。飛んでいる時に必要な操作はこれだけだ。
Okay, so after ending her explanation, Amane turns off the lights, or turns on lights.
結構簡単なのね。
そうだね。
So, basically, in principle, it kind of sounds not too difficult. So your 3 control surfaces and such. So when I heard unfamiliar words like aileron and rudder, it sounded complicated, but once I tried it, it was quite easy. While moving the yoke backwards and forwards, left and right, and pressing the L&R pedals or buttons, that's all there is to it.
アクロバットでもしない限り難しい操作はほとんどない。グライダー乗りに必要なのは風を見つける能力なんだ。
Okay, that's true. So, find the wind.
どこにどんな風が吹いているか、サーマルはどこにあるのか。
Okay.
そうして見つけた風に上手に乗ることができるかどうか。
So, you mean knowledge, experience, and intuition.
そんなところだな。ケーキ類の見方はおいおい覚えてもらうとして、まずは慣れることだな。あとはこっちのパソコンの画面で練習してみてくれ。
Okay, so so now that I've given you some instructions, maybe you can try flying it on your own on that simulator. Okay, got it. So I sat down in front of the PC and started practicing immediately. So club activities have finished and we're on the way home. So I wonder how his first solo went, or his simulated solo.
あーずい。
So Ageha is fanning the chest of her sweat-drenched uniform. And she sees me looking.
おお？なに見てんの？
I wonder if she was teasing Aoi. So she senses me looking at her chest and asks cheerfully, "You know, you should try to be a little bit more ladylike." Okay, that's true. And I think that's one of the reasons why, or one of the things that he doesn't really like about Ageha.
しょうがないじゃん。胸が一番汗かくんだもん。
Oh, come on. You know you like my body. You like my lovely tits.
これって女らしいってことじゃない？
So you see me as a hot, sexy girl, don't you? She asks as she carries on fanning herself. Well, I get a slight feeling that she's trying to show me. There you go.
ガレージのエアコン弱くない？お尻が蒸れちゃうんだけど。
So even Kotori is complaining about the heat as well. Says Kotori as she wriggles her back side around. And when it comes to these two, well, it's spacious and there's no effective heat insulation from the ceiling. Well, it's a garage. What do you expect? It's like a prefabricated building. There's no attic, and the heat from the sun transfers directly to the inside. And even if we turn on the air conditioning, it only has half the effect.
ロボット部よりかはマシよ。あっちは人数多いからムシムシするのよね。汗で。
Well, I'm sure the robotics club gets more funding, and that's why they're able to afford better facilities than the soaring club. Because, well, if you remember, the soaring club was on the verge of shutting down because of not enough members, compared to the robotics club that has like 60 members. So listening to Ageha's story, Kotori makes a face that says, "Ew."
さてと、私こっちだから。
So we get to the usual fork in the road where Ageha leaves us to go in the other direction.
じゃあね。
So see you later. Okay, Ageha. So what is it? Do you want to get some ice cream from the convenience store?
いいけど、なんで急に？
So why? Well, you two were saying how hot it is inside, and I suddenly felt like eating one. So okay, how about I treat you to ice cream? So you want to get one too, Kotori?
いいけど。
Okay. So Kotori seems to be thinking about Ageha being there when she answers. Okay, so let's go then. So I started walking ahead. So in the convenience store parking lot, I bought into the ice cream that I had bought. And I wonder if he bought that expensive Haagen-Dazs ice cream, or Haagen-Dazs. So hanging out in front of the convenience store is one of the privileges of being a high school student. Well, I think that sounds a little bit odd. So Ageha got watermelon flavor, and Kotori got chocolate chip, and I got vanilla Monica.
ハバネさんはカップ派か。棒のアイスは途中で溶けてきて手がベトベトするから好きじゃないの。
Well, it seems like everyone has their own preferences when it comes to ice cream.
ねえ葵、シミュレーターどうだった？
Well, I still don't understand. It was pretty tricky.
どこがどう難しいの？
Well, it just feels kind of inconvenient when I think about doing something, I'm not able to do it quickly. Well, the feeling I get when I move it and the speed, it's quite easy to steer though.
エルロンもラダーもエレベーターも風を受けなきゃ効果ないもんね。
Well, that's true. So using the power of the wind to control the position of the aircraft. Of course, the wind is strong, and small movements of the controls have a big effect, vice versa. However, the glider doesn't have an engine, and you can't easily speed up or slow down. That's true. If you do one thing, it affects everything else, and that's what makes it difficult. So there is a challenge to flying a glider with no engine as opposed to something that has an engine. And you can't just think about the current situation. You have to act accordingly to what will happen next. So it means that experience is needed to ride this thing.
乗ってて気持ちよかった？
Well, to be honest, the simulator didn't feel that good at all. You were watching the screen, right?
なんていうか、すごいもどかしい感じだった。3D のシューティングゲームに比べると圧倒的に爽快感がなかったわね。
Well, you can't compare a flight simulator to something that involves like shooting enemies, like a real FPS game. That's true.
実際に飛ぶのとはやっぱり違うのかな？
Or maybe the feeling of flying, that's not existent in the simulator. Well, I think so. I can't imagine that somehow. Well, how would it feel to fly through the sky in that thing, I wonder? And it still feels a bit unclear.
いいな。私も飛んでみたい。シミュレータならやってみればいいんじゃない？
Well, the simulator has hand controls only, so maybe Kotori can play it and see what's like to fly one. So you can control everything with your hands.
いい。今は葵くんがやるべき時だから。
Well, first of all, Aoi, you need to be trained on how to fly the glider because you'll be the one that's going to operate the actual glider, whereas I'm just doing it for fun. So I'll be patient for now. That's what it seemed like she was saying. So without thinking, Ageha and I looked at each other.
じゃあ早いとこ翼を作って実際に飛べるようにしないとね。
So hurry up and move on so that Kotori can have the simulator to herself. Yeah. Well, if I can quickly become able to fly by myself, I can take Kotori with me. I might be getting ahead of myself, but it's good to have a target, or at least a goal.
チェ外れか。残念。
Well, Ageha finished eating her ice cream and threw the stick into the trash can. Well, I finished eating too, so I'll throw my Monaka wrapper into the trash can too. But for Kotori, she still has not finished her ice cream yet. There you go. So it wasn't as bad as Amane, but the way she ate kind of ruined her pretty girl image. And then she rushed over in her wheelchair and came to throw the cup into the trash can. So does she think that if she doesn't do it quickly, we'll leave her behind? So while we were away from Kotori, Ageha had come up beside me.
気を使ってくれてありがとう。
Well, what do you mean?
とぼけちゃって。私とハバネさんのために誘ってくれたんでしょ？
Well, you invited us for ice cream, so... Well, I don't know, did I? So looking at me as I quietly played dumb, Ageha smiled cheerfully.
あ、お待たせ。
So you didn't need to rush like that, you know?
それじゃあ帰りますか。また明日ね。
So see you later. Okay, see you.
さようなら。
So we see Ageha as she waves her hand. Then I push Kotori's wheelchair along the road back to the dorms. So what's going on? Okay, so they're back at school. Went to the garage and saw a large amount of cardboard boxes and tin cans piled up.
やあ、君たち。
Oh, hello. So what's all this then?
おお、ついに届いたのね。
So before Amane answers, Ageha comes in after us and her eyes sparkle as she looks on.
主翼を製作するための資材だ。外にまだあるから運ぶのを手伝ってくれないか？
Oh, okay, so it looks like the material or the parts for the wings have arrived and they have to make it. So then with a great deal of effort, we carried the materials. So I wonder if or Ageha is gonna use her crafting skills that she learned from the robotics club to build perfect wings that meet the specs Amane was hoping for.
オッケー。 全部着てます。
Okay, so here you go.
よし。
これでようやく翼が作れる。
So Ageha is extremely enthusiastic.
この大きなのは何？でっかい割にやたら軽いけど。
発泡スチロールだ。型を作るのに使う。
Okay, so here's the mold. It's made of styrofoam.
片翼の長さは約8メートル。その型を取るんだからかなりの量必要になるのよ。
So that must be why there are such large amounts of other materials as well.
それが完成すれば飛べるようになるのよね。じゃあ早く作りましょう。
So I wonder if Amane had molds of it previously, and I wonder what happened to those, or did she throw it out? So Kotori's also been keen to start, or keen to start, but it's not like she knows how to make them. So how do we make them? It is something that we can do here.
FRP で作るから多分特殊な機材はほとんどいらないと思う。広さ的にも問題ないんじゃないかな。
Okay.
ですよね、天音先輩。
ああ、前もここで作ったしな。
So well, I've made it before over here, so space is not an issue. Well, what is that though? FRP stuff. Well, I'm not familiar with that term.
強化プラスチックのことだ。主翼を作るための素材になる。
So, strengthen plastic. Well, it does not make sense still. So I think what they need to do is show Aoi the texture of the material. And that's where you can see all those fibers that are impregnated or immersed with plastic resin. So the broken wings are propped against the wall, and they're as smooth and hard to touch. Well, I thought it'd be made from aluminum or something.
プラスチックなんかで割れちゃったりしないの？
So doesn't aluminum have better properties because plastic cracks? And for like a composite-based material, those break very easily because they only have strength in one direction. So as Kotori, as she looks at the broken pieces,
それは大丈夫。ちゃんと作ればね。
but obviously in FRP or composite-based materials, if you lay it up in the correct formation, so you have one layer with fibers in the 0-degree direction, and another layer with fibers in the 90-degree direction, and so on, you can get a material with proper strength.
おかしいな。ちゃんと作ったのにな。
Well, obviously it's pretty tricky to get all those layups correct, and to make sure that each layer is bonded correctly. So Amane goes into deep thought as she too looks at the broken pieces next to Kotori.
FRP ってすっごい頑丈なの。プラスチックにガラス繊維を混ぜて強度を上げたものなんだけど、考え方は鉄筋コンクリートと同じかな。
Okay, so the fibers are made of fiberglass, and it's kind of like I'm having a rebar in concrete. So concrete can be strong if you put rebars in it made of metal. So reinforced concrete.
ほら、あれってコンクリートの中に鉄筋を通すじゃない？
There you go.
コンクリートは硬いけど、引っ張られたり曲げられたりする力に弱いの。鉄筋を通すことでその弱点を補ってるわけ。 FRP も同じで、 硬いけど弾性率が低いプラスチックにガラス繊維を混ぜることで強化するの。
Well, I think it depends. There are some plastics that are very flexible, they bend, and they can't keep their shape. But there's some plastics, they snap very easily. And those are the ones that you use for the outlet plugs. I see. So just go along with it for now. Well, I'm not sure if I'll understand or not. Or if I'll understand or not. So as for the finer details, we'll probably learn those in class sooner or later. That's the kind of school it is.
どうして鉄やアルミじゃなくその FRP っていうのを使うの？
Well, iron's obviously too heavy for a glider, because that's what they use to make steel.
いくつか利点があるんだけど、多分グライダー製作には最も適した素材なんじゃないかな。
And I think aluminum is a bit heavy for gliders as well. But in most large airplanes with engines, they use aluminum for the wings. And I'm sure all the passenger jets so far use aluminum. Well, I know the 787 and the A350 and some of the 777s and A330s, they've started to put in some more composites in the wings. And it helps lighten up the aircraft weight. But the big problem is that they only have strength in one direction, and so if it gets damaged, it's pretty much done. And for composites, they lose their strength a lot when they are damaged. And
そうだな。現在グライダーの素材としては FRP がメジャーだ。強度はもちろんのこと、プラスチックなので金属で作るよりも軽量化できる。
there you go. It's like metal weighs more. So iron's obviously way too heavy, and aluminum, it's okay for large airplanes because the weight doesn't really matter that much, but it matters a lot more in a glider where it's small.
加工が簡単でコストも安め。後から補修もできるし、腐食もしない。
Okay, so it's like, well, if it does damage, there are ways to fix FRP, and that applies to composites as well. And there is another advantage where it doesn't corrode, so it won't rust under extreme weather conditions.
ちなみに FRP は意外と身近なものにも使われてるのよ。
So like where? Racing cars? So what could those be?
車のバンパーや漁船の船体などがそうだな。
Okay, yeah, bumpers of cars are made from plastics, and I think the hull for fishing boats, they actually use thicker, also like thicker FRPs.
公園のスワンボートとか、あとあれ、ケンタの店先に立ってるカーネルおじさん。
So as she mentions the Colonel, Kotori and I not in agreement. Well, I've touched the Colonel statue many times and also had silly photos taken next to it with my friends from the Cycle Racing Club. So that's FRP, right?
カーネルおじさんと同じ素材でグライダーもできてるのか。
Kotori murmurs, but I wasn't sure if she was happy because she... Oh, sorry. I skipped it. Let me look back. So Kotori murmured, but I wasn't sure if she was happy because she felt that the glider was somehow more familiar than she realized, or because her dream was shattered a little.
そうね、簡単に説明すると、まず型を作るでしょ、翼の。それに FRP の素材を塗っていくんだけど、まずはこっちの。
So first, you wrap the FRP material around the shape. So Amane opens one of the box, or Ageha opens one of the boxes that had just arrived and pulls out some sort of cloth.
このガラスマットを敷くのね。これがさっき言ったガラス繊維。その上から樹脂を塗り、またガラスマットを敷いて、また塗ってって繰り返すの。
So you can see something of like how composites are made. So basically you have the glass mat that's like the fibers, and then you pour resin around it. So basically the fiberglass is being mixed or immersed in resin.
あとはそれが固まるのを待って取り外して。
And it's complete.
まだよ。表面をピカピカに磨いて塗装すれば完成。
So one thing that's beneficial is that they can just let air dry in the garage. So once they have the FRP material made, so having the resin mixed in with the fiberglass fibers, they can just let it dry. And I know some processes they actually have to use the autoclave, where so it gets heat treated and it gets pressurized. And the pressure is what helps cure the resin.
簡単そうね。今説明したのはあくまでかいつまんでだからね。
実際はもっと手順が多い。これだけ大きなものを作るとなると、普通のやり方じゃ通用しない場面も出てくる。
まあ一個ずつ進めていきましょう。
Okay, so what?
設計図見せてもらっていいですか？
So what else do we need to make this wing complete? So we have the material, we shape it into the shape of a wing, and we polish it to make it nice and smooth and allow air to easily flow above and below the wing. So as Ageha takes a look at the plans, she and Amane start discussing something.
なるほど。ここは分割して後から接合するしかなさそうですね。
So it looks like they need more work to make it match the blueprint that Amane has for the glider and the wings.
しかし、そうすると重量の問題が出てくる。あまり重くすると。
And it's like, well, we do have to consider the fact that every pound or kilogram counts. So if we try to have the wings join here, that glue that's used to join the wings, and plus the extra material, is going to add weight, and it may add it in the wrong places and not have the wings perform up to spec. So the conversation moves on to things that we don't understand.
先輩、主翼作りなんですけど、私に任せてもらえませんか？
うん、構わないぞ。
But for Ageha, it's like, well, I do have some way to make it match the blueprint. Just let me do it.
私がやるよりいいだろうからな。
But anyways, the overall result is going to be better than what I tried to make, right?
ありがとうございます。ハバネさん。
Okay, so Kotori, Habayan-san. So I think Ageha wants Kotori to help her. Well, I think it's about time for them to start being more friendly towards each other, but still...
何かしら。ハバネさんも手伝ってね。
There you go. So, I want you to help me.
もちろん、そのつもりよ。
Okay, so I'll help as well, says Aoi.
葵はいいや。手が足りない時だけで、シミュレータの方を優先して。
So I think it's like, well, Kotori can help me with the build, but for you, you focus on flying this thing, so learn how to fly. So work more with your simulator. So Kotori gives me an uneasy glance. Okay, so I'll leave it to you two then.
おお、任された。
So with that, Ageha becomes the one in charge of making the main wings and then got to work on making them.
じゃあ教えた通りやってみよっか。
Okay, so let's start.
まず発泡スチロールで型を作る。
So first, get the shape
け
or the
ど
rush.
ポリエステル樹脂が発泡スチロールを溶かすから先に上からコーティング。
So get the rough shape in. So until just now, Kotori had been taking Ageha's impromptu FRP course. Oh, so Ageha's teaching Kotori how FRP is made. And she had been seriously taking notes and reading them back and forth as they proceed with the work. And by the way, for now, it's just practice, so they're trying to make something that's not related to the main wings. So try to make a flat panel made of FRP and show me how it ends up.
先にガラスマットを敷いて、その上からポリエステル樹脂をローラーでコロコロと。ああ、ダメダメ。もっとしっかり塗り込まないと。
So hey, the fibers are important. They decide the properties of this material, so you have to lay it out properly.
いや、やってるわよ。隅っこの方はハケを使って。樹脂をつけすぎないで。
And make sure you apply the resin evenly. Make sure it fills every nook and cranny. And make sure every strand of fiber is immersed in resin.
分かってるわよ。うるさいな。気泡が残ってると空洞ができて、そこだけ強度が弱くなっちゃう。
There you go, Seika. Well, if it doesn't immerse and there's bubbles, that's going to weaken the material properties.
そしたらまた折れちゃうんだから。
And when they're not built correctly, there's a good chance that they will break again. And what's Amane doing? So as Amane stood beside me, teaching me about piloting, she seemed to have a hurt expression on her face. Are you okay, Amane?
いいけど。
She answered, still with that hurt look about her. It seems like Amane has a complex about her lack of dexterity. So Amane and I were doing pilot training with the simulator.
旋回中ラダーの操舵量が少なかったりタイミングが遅いと打ち滑りを起こす。逆にラダーを使いすぎたりタイミングが早いと外滑りする。
So slipping in or slipping out are the terms used to refer to the diagonal movement of the glider. And this is caused when you are trying to turn but the nose is not pointing in the right direction.
打ち滑りも外滑りも相対風に対してグライダーの向きがずれるから揚力の低下が発生してしまう。
Okay? That means that if the glider is moving through the air at a decent speed, even if there's no wind at all, it is still the same as if I were taking wind from the direction in which it is moving. And this is what's known as relative wind. So the glider is moving diagonally, the wind hits it diagonally too. So that means if the glider takes the wind from the front, the function of that aircraft are maximized. Well, that's obviously true. So when Amane sees that there will be a reduction in lift, it's because it cannot take the wind directly from the front.
旋回中はそうでなくても揚力が低下するから打ち滑りや外滑りをするとかなりの高度をロスすることに。
失礼します。
Uh-oh. So I wonder why Akari's here. So Akari Kamoi, the vice president of the student council, enters the garage.
やあ、副会長。
こんにちは、望月先輩。それから。
Hello? Our eyes met as I lower my head in a bow.
こんにちは、水瀬くん。
Hello, Minase-kun. So Akari looks around the garage and nods with approval. Okay, so she's like, well, I'm glad that I've seen some progress or some activity in this club room, rather than it being dormant as it was previously.
ちゃんと活動なさっているようですね。
And it's like, well, I do see that you're working hard, and
ああ、まるで部活のようだよ。
so now we're doing something in the club, right? There's stuff going on. She says with a pride because there are club activities after all.
ところで、何か用かい？
So what do you need then?
少し様子を見に来たんです。あの時は状況が状況だったので。
So just here to check up. Oh, so as you can see, we are doing very well.
ええ、見ればわかるわ。
Well, I can see. So for some reason, I feel that she has a bit of a sharp tongue when talking to me. Well, it seems like the Vice President Akari Kamoi is looking at me like she's assessing me.
確かにお人よしそうな顔してるわね。悪人ではなさそうだけど。油断ならないわ。
Kind of suspicious of this Minase person. So what is it?
いえ、何でも。
Nothing? Does she have a problem with me? So I wonder if Akari, she's kind of skeptical about Aoi, even with all those words that I remember it was Kanako who was talking about Aoi before when Akari's plan to shut down the club got defeated. So Akari heads over to the other two working at the back of the garage. So Kotori and Ageha making the wings.
少し見せてもらってもいいかしら。あかりさん、どうぞどうぞ。こんなもんでどうかしら。いいんじゃないかな。
Okay, so Kotori's getting better at making FRP material.
これは FRP ね。何を作っているの？お皿よ。
A dish.
お皿？
So they're trying to make something simpler before they move on to the actual product, the wings.
練習してるんです。グライダーの翼を作るんですけど、いきなり本番じゃ失敗した時困るんで。
So let's see if Kotori can make something as simple as a dish.
あとはこれが固まるのを待つのよね。そしたら磨いて色を塗って。
So I believe it's gonna take hours for the resin to harden, and even if it hardens, it's still best to leave it aside overnight to let everything harden and settle in before it actually do polishing and just sanding off the rough edges. So Kotori mumbled to herself as she checked her notes.
ハバネさん、使い終わったローラーやハケはすぐ洗い流した方がいいわ。
Oh, okay. So Akari's giving Kotori some tips on using FRPs. Like well, make sure you wash all the tools because once that hardens, it's gonna be nearly impossible to clean it off afterwards.
樹脂が固まってしまうと使えなくなってしまうから。
There you go. And you'll have to buy new tools.
そうだった。
So Kotori hurriedly goes to the wash. Goes to wash them. But that was a close one. She almost ruined some of the equipment we had just bought.
それから硬化剤を混ぜた樹脂は温度が高いほど固まりやすいから、容器はなるべく日陰か涼しい場所に置くといいわ。
So Kotori wiped her wet hand on her skirt and made a note of Akari's advice.
主翼作りは長丁場になるから、そういうことも考えておかないといけないんだね。
So what they can do is they can put the wings in a more warm area, like outside, so that the wings can cure quickly, and then the tools can go in the cool areas. And this is, like I said, this is where usually the autoclave comes in. So it heats it up and it pressurizes it, and that helps the resin cure faster. So Ageha also looks like she's thinking seriously. So after confirming that the other two were doing proper club activities, relieved, she came back over to us.
うまくいっているようですね。
ああ、
Yeah, everything's going well. Amane answers proudly. She looks happy to be praised like this.
ところで、実はもう一つ要件があるんです。
Uh-oh, she has another problem.
副部長を決めていただけないでしょうか。
Oh, so you need a vice president or like a second leader. Second in charge. So the other two working at the back of the garage stop and turn their attention this way.
ええ。
Okay, so I think it's like for documentation, for official paperwork, you have a president, that's Amane, you have a vice president, second in charge. And it's like, well, we need somebody to fill in for that position to make sure the paperwork is current and complete.
望月先輩はとても有能な方ですが、お一人では手が回らない場合もあるでしょう。そんな時、どなたかいていただいた方がこちらとしても助かります。
And plus it's so things like, well, it's beneficial to have somebody or an assistant to help you, because obviously doing all of this by yourself is quite a tough task. So apart from Amane, everyone made a face that seemed to say, oh, I see. Well, it's probably not just Akari, but all the other student council members in the past would also have had trouble with Amane. She's very unique. So sometimes she expresses ideas that differ from the generation social norms, or the general social norms. And there was the issue with the club losing its status the other day, and the fact that she keeps repeating the year is a prime example of her uniqueness. Well, she's trying to say that she would like someone to act as a middleman to keep things running smoothly like a manager. So, but what do you really mean? Is that you need someone to act as the mediator, right? And from the few days that I had spent with Amane, it seems she isn't suited to being any sort of mediator. Well, she decides the club's principles and therefore the reason for it to exist, whereas the second in charge is needed to bring everyone together to carry that out.
わかった。決めておくよ。
Okay, so I will appoint someone then.
助かります。
So Akari seemed relieved as she nodded, and then she glanced at me.
やはりこの水瀬葵が選ばれてしまうのかしら。
Well, I think that's obvious based on what we're seeing here.
かなこさんの話では人望はあるようだし、行動力にも富んでいる。
There you go. So so based on, I think that was around episode 20 or 23, where after Akari's plan at shutting down the club got defeated, Kanako's like, well, you seem to have some interest in that Aoi person, right? And I remember that Kaneko was teasing Akari.
何を考えているの私は。
And now she's taking a second look at that, of those words, or taking a second thought. Hey, so what are we talking about over there? So you're saying something about me and looked like you were glancing right over at me.
見てないわ。自意識過剰よ、水瀬くん。
Okay, so at this rate, it seems like she is trying to hide something from Aoi.
私はソアリング部の活動状況を見ていただけです。
Really? Oh, I see. Okay, sorry. So actually, she wasn't glancing at me, she was just staring.
では、私はこれで。
Now that she had finished what she had come to do, Akari left in a hurry. Wait. So on the way out, she tripped over a cardboard box.
もう、ダメよ、この段ボール。
So once more, she went to leave. So apparently, she became too distracted thinking about Aoi, and she didn't know that she was walking to a cardboard box.
何あれ。
Okay, so what is that about? And this is a good place to stop for episode 28. So we see that there is a bit more activity going on in the Soaring Club compared to what it was many episodes ago, when it was just Amane on the drawing board. And I kind of wonder what Akari thinks of Aoi, given that she's having so many second thoughts the moment she looks at him. And she does remember those words that Kaneko mentioned in the past. So let's see, number one, how the construction of the wings for the glider ends up thanks to Ageha and to a small extent Kotori. And I also wonder how the training is going for Aoi. So I do like how they mentioned that, well, Amane should have a second in command. And it's because Amane, even though she's really smart, she likes to work alone, and it's really hard for her to connect to other people. And that's why it would be beneficial for someone like Aoi to help bridge Amane to everyone else, especially for the student council who's constantly having all these concerns for Amane. And I wonder how many times the student council has received requests to have the Soaring Club shut down because they're using too much resources and having no progress. So with all that in mind, I will see you later.